Okay, so there are a few ways we're going to be dividing polynomials today. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to divide by a monomial. Okay, so here it says, today we will divide polynomials by monomials. So we're going to start there and then we will go back to our warm-up, okay? All right, so when you are dividing by a monomial, you are going to take this monomial expression and you can divide everything by 3a squared. Okay, do you have to write this out every single time? No, but we're going to write this out for our notes so that we can take that step by step. Okay, so whatever you're dividing by, you are dividing each term by that value. Okay, when you are dividing variables, can you tell me what you do with the exponents when you're dividing the variables? Yeah, we're going to subtract them. Good. Okay, so when dividing variables, we are going to subtract the exponents. All right, so for this one, when you divide number by number, negative 12 by 3 is negative 4. A to the 5th divided by a squared would be a to what power? The 3rd. Okay, and then I want you to finish that now. And you can start to look at the next one and start thinking about that format. All right, so then let's check and make sure we have 10a squared plus 7a. If you're ever unsure of whether like you're subtracting or dividing, it's usually like when you can divide it evenly, people are unsure. You can always write it out. If you have a to the 5th, that means you're multiplying a 5 times. If it's a squared, you have it twice. So you're dividing an a by an a by an a. That's why you have a to the 3rd left over. Okay, so you could use that visual to help you if you needed it. Okay? All right, and then for B, you have this value to the negative 1 power. If something is to the negative 1, that's going to be 1 over 3x squared y squared. Anytime you have a negative exponent, okay, to make it a positive, you put it under 1. So this is a different notation. We are going to be working with negative exponents later on this year. But if you multiply something, because they are multiplied together, by 1 over this value, that is the same thing as dividing everything here, by 3x squared y squared. So if you see the negative 1, this is still division. We are going to divide every term. I'm going to do the first one with you, and then I'll let you finish it, okay? So 9 divided by 3 is 3. X to the 9th divided by x squared would be x to the 7th. And then y to the 5th divided by y squared would be y to the 3rd. Okay, and then I'm going to give you some time to finish those next two, and then just be ready to share, please. so whenever you are dividing here in this section, they are always going to give you the variable of -1. They'll never do something larger. And then when you are dividing here, sometimes you might have a fraction that you simplify. Okay, so you might have a fraction in front, but your variable should simplify out nicely here. All right, and then Heidi, do you want to tell me what you got for this next one? Yep, great. 7x squared, y squared. Okay, and then Ava, what'd you get for this last one here? Great. Okay, so the x cubed. Yep, it is. Yep, so the y squared just goes away because it'll be y squared divided by itself. So we don't even need to worry about that. Okay, and then you can keep that as a minus because you had a negative divided by a positive. Okay, nice work. So when we are doing long division, when you are setting up long division, okay, we have this division symbol here. The value that goes underneath is called the dividend. Okay, it's the value that's being divided. Okay, the divisor is on the outside here. And do you guys remember what the result is called? A quotient. That is right. Okay, and then you do all this work, you do all these cool things, and then you end up with a remainder. Okay, so there's going to be a certain form where we are going to write our answers here. Okay, so we are going to come back and do that after we look at our warm-up. Okay, so there's going to be a certain form for how we write our solution. All right, so earlier today, I had you attempt some long division here. So we have the 3 as the divisor, 1,024 as the dividend. Okay, and what we should be looking at is, does 3 go into 1? No, so then does 3 go into 10? Yes, how many times? 3. So could we at least get here? I'd start with a 3. So when you guys are doing this, some of you do remember and are really good at it, and we just put the 9 here without thinking. Where does the 9 come from? Yeah, 3 times 3. And then what do we do next? Subtract. Okay, these are similar steps to what we're going to be doing today. So you subtract, okay, and then if it doesn't go into there, then you bring down the next value, and then the process starts all over again. Now we say, how many times does 3 go into 12? 4 times. We multiply, we subtract. Doesn't go into 0, so we bring this down. 3 goes into 4, 1 time. We multiply, we subtract. And then there's no other numbers to bring down. So one way that you can write this, sometimes I was told to write it like this with the little remainder. Other times we would just write it as 341 and 1/3. What would be among the people?
So it's always
Yep, the remainder goes over the divisor. Yep. Okay, so again, that's one way you can write it. So I know some of you know 1/3 is 0.3 repeating, so if you wrote it like that, that's fine. This is similar to the form we're going to be writing it in today. Okay, I had one person tell me, hey, I learned this long division today. So if you do remember it, it is going to be helpful for the polynomial process. Okay, if not, I wrote down some things to help you remember. So your solution form is going to be the quotient, which if you look at this little diagram here, the quotient is what is on top. And then we are going to add that to the remainder. So whatever you get for the remainder. goes on top, and like we just said, that goes over the divisor. It's just now your divisor isn't going to be a number, it's going to be an expression. Okay, so when you are ready, you can look at part A, and I just want you to put the divisor and the dividend in the correct places to start. Okay, so for part A, you can go ahead and put those in the correct places, and then I'm going to help you start it. Okay, so whatever comes second here, it says divided by x minus 3. This is the divisor. So x minus 3 goes on the outside. And this first value is the dividend. Okay, I put some notes on the side here just to help you if you got stuck. Not something that you're going to have to write out. Okay, yeah. And there's a couple different ways that you can do this. So I'm going to go pretty slowly the first time just so that you guys can stay with me. Okay, so if you're catching on quickly, just be patient. Okay, you can have some problems where you'll be able to work ahead. But the first thing that we have to do is look at the first number in the dividend and the first number in the divisor. Okay, so that would be the x squared and x. Okay, and there's two ways that you can do this. So one way is you can just take x squared and divide it by x. X is correct. Okay, so you can just divide those, you get x, and that's going to go on the top. Okay, I found as people do this, sometimes they don't think of it as division, but more so they're asking themselves this question: what can I multiply by x to get x squared? So that's what I wrote here for you. What can you multiply by x that will give us x squared? Okay, and your answer is x, so we put that on top. Okay, so we just did these two steps together. Any questions about why x is on the top there? All right, let's look at our next step. So our next step says that we are going to distribute. So we have to distribute that x to all terms of the divisor, and then we're putting the products underneath. Okay, so if you can just watch me for a moment, and then I'll give you a moment to fill that in. What I'm going to do is x times x to get x squared, x times negative 3 to get negative 3x. Okay, so now you can do that. X times x, put your x squared underneath, distribute, put that underneath. Okay, and we do want to line up those like terms there. Okay, and I have my line down there. That's because I'm ready to do our next step, which is subtracting. So when we were subtracting with the numbers, our review, okay, we only had to subtract one number, but because we have two values here, we are going to distribute the negative, and we are going to circle the sign. We are going to distribute the negative, and we are going to circle the sign. Okay, and it shows that that step is completed. So when you distribute your negative, you're going to write minus x squared. And if we distribute a negative to a negative, what happens? It becomes positive. So we're going to change it to a positive, and again, you're circling it to show that step. From there, you are just going to add straight down. These now are going to be opposites so that when you add down, they cancel. Here, you're going to do negative 1x plus 3x. That's going to give you 2x. And then we are going to drop down the negative 6. And then we start all over again. So we're going to repeat these steps for the new leading term. Okay, so I want you to try to do that part by yourself. If you're unsure and you just want to think about it before you write it down, that's okay. So let's fill in that ask yourself blank. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the new leading term. So now we have 2x. So what we're going to ask ourselves is what can I multiply by x to get 2x? Or you could do the division. What's 2x divided by x? What's that going to be? 2. Okay, so on top, I'm going to put a plus 2. Okay, so we are doing that process again with our new leading term. Okay, so we're repeating these steps. So now we found this, so we're going to distribute. Do you guys want to see if you can do the distributing without me? So you would do 2 times x, and then 2 times negative 3. Okay, so 2 times negative 3 would be negative 6. We're going to make our line. We're going to change the sign. So here, these should look the same. When you distribute these, it should be opposite. So this is negative 2x. This is a positive. Okay, and in this case, there's no remainder. Okay, that does happen on occasion. If there's no remainder, then we are going to write our solution as just the quotient. Okay, we are going to stop when we have a dividend whose degree is less than the divisor. Okay, so let's see if this works. Okay, and we're going to talk about that more on the back side there. So when you're writing your solution, you're only going to have your quotient, okay, which is x plus 2. So when you are distributing the negative, you're going to change both the signs. So it was negative, but minus a negative is going to change to a positive. And the same thing happened here. So anytime you distribute, you're going to be changing those signs. Okay, so in order to see if the solution is correct, all you have to do is the multiplication, right? So if we divided this, this is our quotient, what can we multiply together? X plus 2 and x plus 3. So we can multiply the quotient by the divisor. Okay, if you have a remainder, you would add the remainder to it. Okay, and what it should be equal to is the dividend. So I want you to practice that. I want you to multiply your quotient, x plus 2, by the divisor, okay, and verify that it equals the dividend. Once you've done that, you are welcome to start on the next problem on the next page. when you're multiplying a binomial times a binomial, what favorite thing are we going to use here? How do you multiply? Spoiling! Yes, FOIL. Yeah, technically it's in factor form. So first times first, x squared. You have 2x minus 3x, which is negative x. And yay, it's the divisor, so we did a nice job. Okay, I see some of you are already setting up the next one, which is great. That means you're applying what we did up here, because see how this negative 1 exponent is coming back? All right, so when you have that negative 1, just remember that means this is the divisor. So the negative 1 is the same thing as your division. Okay, if you can start that, feel free. If you're unsure, I'm going to walk you through it in just a moment. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we just want to ask ourselves, what can I multiply by x to get negative 6x squared? Or let's just divide. If you do negative 6x squared divided by x, the x cancels out with one of the x's here, and you get negative 6x. That's what's going to go on top. Once you decide what goes on top, you distribute. Okay, so go ahead and distribute. Okay, so once you distribute, negative 6 times x is negative 6x squared. These should be the same. The next ones are rarely the same because you have to multiply. Negative 6 times 7 is negative 42x. Okay, and then from there, now we have to do the subtraction. When you're doing the subtraction, it's a distribution of the negative. So minus a negative turns into plus, yep, a positive minus a negative turns into a positive. Okay, so you should be just saying your steps, right? You distribute minus a negative, then you can add your like terms. So this would be 47x. Then you can bring down the negative 10. Now your process is going to start all over. So you're asking yourself, what can you multiply by x to get to 47x? I want you to put it up top there, and I want you to see if you can distribute. And then think about ways you can use some mental math to do that calculation. so yeah, what do we put on the top? So what do we put here? Why are you guys scared to tell me? 47. Okay, so plus 47. Yeah, that's right. Again, we're just doing this little division, right? 47x divided by x. The x's cancel, so you get 47. That's what we're putting here. Now we distribute. Now we're doing 47 times x. So the first thing you multiply, those should match. When you're doing 47 times 7, may I recommend doing 40 times 7, because what's 4 times 7? 28, yep, so it'll be 280. And then if you do 7 times 7, 49, and then you can just add those together. Okay, yep, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then this would be positive at this point. And then we're going to distribute. So I have a negative here. I have a negative here. Okay, which means I'm going to have a remainder. So remember I had us highlight earlier, your remainder has to be, okay, it will have a lesser degree than the divisor. So we're going to investigate that for a minute. So your remainder should always have a lesser degree than the divisor. Okay, we were just working on degrees. Do you guys know what the degree is of x plus 7? Good. So what's the degree of a number with no variable? 0. Right? It can't be 1 because this one's 1, right? Okay, so this degree would be 0 if there's no variable, so it does have a lesser degree. That also lets you know when to stop, because sometimes we're like, well, how do you know like when you keep going, when you don't? As soon as this value it has a lesser degree than this, you don't have to go any further. So your solution is the quotient, and normally it's plus, but do you see how our remainder is a negative? So we can put minus. Okay, you can also put plus in the negative there. I'm not going to mark that wrong, so don't stress about that. Okay, and then it's going to go over your divisor there. That's your form. It's actually the same with this. 1 over 3, right? 1 over your divisor. Okay, so here, remainder over your divisor. Okay, now, if you are missing a term, this says you need to write it. You don't have to write it. I'm going to show you one case where it honestly doesn't matter. I'm going to show you another case where it is helpful. So if you are missing a term, I do recommend writing it with a coefficient of 0 as a placeholder. Okay, so you can look and see what term is missing from the dividend. But in this case, like I said, this is a special case where you're going to have some cancellations where it's not going to matter. Both of these are missing a term. Can you look at C and D and then think about which term is missing from each of those? Yeah, this one's missing. So for C, you have 3x to the third, 9x squared, negative 14. So what term don't you have there? Yeah, it's missing an x. Okay, and there's going to be something missing from part D as well. So like I said, I do recommend putting that in for those, but there are going to be some rare cases where it doesn't matter. Okay, one of those cases is part C. Okay, and then when you are starting this, just like we have been doing, you're always looking at those first values. You're only looking at the first one and the first one. So we're doing 3x cubed divided by x. I want you to put that on top. Okay, so here you would get 3x squared. That's what should go on top there, 3x squared. Okay, so now when I multiply, 3x squared times x is 3x cubed. Those should always match. Okay, this is what makes this one special. You have 3x squared times 3, so it's plus 9x squared. Okay, this is a rare case, but I think it's important you see some of the different cases so you don't get confused when you have to problem solve on your own. So for this one, do you see how this makes a negative and this makes a negative? So you would have a 0 here and a 0 here. And then this one would be a 0, so that's why it's not going to matter, because really the only thing you'd have left over is what? Negative 14. You could put the 0x there, it's just, it would have to be something by 0. So let's think about the degrees. The degree of the number is 0. The degree of this is 1. It's a lesser degree. We know that we're done. Okay, so your solution is 3x squared. If you have a negative remainder, we'll use a minus, and it will be 14 over the divisor. Okay, so again, that is a special case, not 100% necessary in this example. The next one, we're going to see why it is beneficial. So with this, I have negative y squared plus 2y cubed plus 25. So if it's not in standard form, let's rewrite it in standard form. And you'll notice when you are starting to write it, if it's not, like if you accidentally start with that, that would definitely be something I would do by accident, just because we're so used to starting at the beginning. Okay, and again, you are missing a y term, so we're going to put that 0y there. Okay, can you do it right if you don't have that placeholder in? Yeah, you could. It's just more likely to make a mistake when you don't line up your like terms. Yeah, there can. Yeah. Don't worry, I'm not going to get into that. But why don't you guys try this one on your own? Let's see how that goes. All right, let's check and make sure we started this okay. So when you do 2y cubed divided by y, what did you start at the top? What was the first number you put at the top? Yeah, great. Okay, so 2y squared is where we should start. And then once we distribute, we get 2y cubed minus 6y squared. Change the sign, circle. Change the sign, circle. Okay, so some of you aren't circling. I really would like you to do that step. You need to have your correct signs here. So now when I add my like terms, I have 5y squared plus 0y plus 25. All of those are going to drop down. Okay, and then Nihal, what did you get for the second one? So what was the second value you got at the top? Plus 5y, great. So that's going to be 5y squared minus 15y. And then again, we change the sign, we change the sign. So this becomes a positive 15y. Okay, so Caleb, what's the last value I'm going to put here? Okay, so once we get here, we're just going to divide 15y by y. So what's that? 15, yeah. And once you do that, we're going to distribute 15 times y, 15 times negative 3, and then we change the sign, Okay, this is your remainder, and then I want you to write your solution. What's that? All right, so then your final answer is 2y squared plus 5y plus 15 plus 70 over y minus 3. Hey, if you guys got 20 for your remainder, because I did see a couple people who got that, you just want to double check this step here. Make sure you do the distribution of the signs so you have a positive 15. Okay. All right, now how can you check to see if our solutions are correct when you have a remainder? You do the quotient times the dividend plus the remainder. I'll just put plus r, is that fine? And then let's make sure that it equals the dividend. Okay, you do not have to do this on your homework every time. Okay, you don't have to do it anytime on your homework if you don't want to. This is just a tool to help you so you know whether or not you got your answer correct. Okay, so we're going to check part D. So if we do y minus 3 times 2y squared plus 5y plus 15, okay, I want you to use your strategies because we just took a quiz over this on how to distribute. Distribute. I need you to do this last part here. All right, so when you distribute the y, you should have 2y cubed plus 5y squared plus 15y. Okay, then we distribute the negative 3. So negative 6y squared, negative 15y, negative 45. And I like stacking them up because I do think it's helpful when you're combining like terms. These are going to cancel. And then we have to add our remainder. Our remainder is 70. And then look, we have 2y cubed minus y squared minus 45. So we did it. All right, so a few things. One, this is your homework for 4.4. Okay, that is what is due tomorrow in Google Classroom.